Something subtle happens the moment you stop caring. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deep enough that his nervous system feels it before his mind can explain it. You didn't announce your withdrawal. You didn't threaten, accuse, or demand. You simply stopped investing emotional energy where it was no longer returned. And that is precisely what changes everything. A man is rarely shaken by words. He is shaken by absence. When you stop reacting, stop over-explaining, stop adjusting yourself to keep emotional contact alive, his inner balance collapses. What once felt predictable suddenly becomes unstable. What felt guaranteed becomes uncertain. And uncertainty is the fastest way to awaken obsession. In Jung's view, the psyche panics when a familiar emotional source disappears without explanation. As Carl Jung said, the unconscious reacts long before logic catches up. Your withdrawal doesn't register as indifference to him. It registers as loss of control. Before, he knew where you were emotionally. Now he doesn't. And that gap creates tension. When you stop caring, you stop feeding the role he unconsciously assigned you. The emotional stabilizer, the one who absorbs inconsistency, the one who waits. Without that role being played, his inner structure destabilizes. He starts replaying conversations, reading silence, searching for signs. His mind turns toward you not because you chased him, but because you left space. This is where fixation begins. Not love yet, not clarity, but panic. Because emotional withdrawal does not feel like rejection, it feels like being replaced by the unknown. And the unknown activates fear. Fear sharpens focus. Focus creates sudden interest. You didn't become colder. You became unavailable to dynamics that drained you. And paradoxically, that is what pulls him closer. Jung believed that what we ignore consciously returns with greater force unconsciously. When you remove emotional access, his psyche tries to restore balance. He checks your presence. He reevaluates your value. He begins to feel what you once felt, the tension of not knowing where you stand. This is the first shift, not because you played a game, but because you stopped betraying yourself. And when a woman stops caring from exhaustion rather than strategy, the energy change is unmistakable. It carries weight. It carries finality. And it forces the other person to finally feel what they took for granted. This is where his mind begins to change, not toward control, but toward awareness. Silently, uncomfortably, inevitably. What happens next is not romantic. It's psychological. When you stop caring, his mind doesn't suddenly fill with love. It fills with questions. Why is she quiet? Why isn't she reacting? Why does it feel different this time? The male psyche is deeply oriented toward feedback. When emotional feedback disappears, the mind searches for meaning. And when no meaning is given, it creates its own, often far more intense than reality. Your silence becomes a mirror. Before, your availability softened his indifference. Now, your absence amplifies it back onto him. This is where panic quietly enters. Not the dramatic kind, the internal one. The kind that disrupts focus. The kind that shows up as restlessness, irritability, sudden memories of you at random moments. Because when you stop caring, you remove emotional regulation he didn't realize he depended on. In Jungian psychology, this is the moment when projection collapses. He was projecting stability, reassurance, and emotional continuity onto you. When that projection disappears, he is forced to confront his own emptiness. And the psyche hates emptiness. It rushes to fill it. So his thoughts return to you. Not because you disappeared, but because something in him did. He starts revisiting moments he dismissed. Your tone, your patience, your presence. Things that once blended into the background now stand out sharply because contrast creates value. And you created contrast by withdrawing emotionally without explanation. This is why his interest feels sudden. It isn't new, it was dormant. When you cared, he could afford not to. When you stopped, the balance reversed. And this reversal destabilizes power. He may not reach out immediately. Often, fixation comes before action. The mind circles first. It checks. It watches. It calculates. It wants reassurance without asking for it. Because to ask would mean admitting loss of control. Jung wrote that the unconscious clings hardest to what threatens the ego's stability. Your emotional withdrawal threatens the illusion that he had time, access, and certainty. And once that illusion breaks, curiosity turns into anxiety. Anxiety turns into attachment. Attachment turns into pursuit, or avoidance intensified. Either way, you are no longer invisible. Not because you became distant, but because you stopped compensating. This is the moment when his inner narrative changes. From "she's always there" to "what if she's gone?" And that single question can occupy a man's mind far longer than any argument ever could. This is not manipulation. It is consequence. And it begins the psychological shift that cannot be undone. Because once absence is felt, it is never forgotten. After the panic settles, something deeper begins to surface: fixation. This is the stage where his mind doesn't just notice your absence, it orbits it. He starts wondering what changed inside you, not what you're doing outside. Because behavior can be rationalized, emotional withdrawal cannot. You didn't punish him. You didn't create drama. You didn't try to be understood. And that is exactly why his mind cannot resolve it. In Jung's psychology, unresolved emotional shifts activate what he called the complex. A charged inner knot that keeps pulling attention back to the same object. As Carl Jung observed, when something meaningful disappears without explanation, the psyche does not let it go. It circles it, again and again. So he begins replaying the past. Moments he once minimized now feel heavy. Your patience now feels rare. Your emotional presence now feels irreplaceable. And here's the crucial part. Fixation does not come from affection. It comes from loss of emotional access. Before, he could feel you even when you weren't there. Now, he can't feel you at all. That silence creates a vacuum. And the mind hates vacuums. It fills them with imagination, fear, and longing. He imagines you moving on. He imagines being replaced. He imagines that the version of you he knew no longer exists. And in a way, it doesn't. This is why his interest feels urgent and disproportionate. Because he's not responding to the present. He's reacting to the threat of permanent disconnection. He may start checking signs. Are you colder? Are you happier? Are you less available? Not to reconnect yet, but to orient himself. To see if he still has emotional coordinates. And the more neutral you remain, the louder his inner noise becomes. You see, when you cared, he was emotionally ahead. Now, he's behind, and trying to catch up without admitting it. This is where many women break their own power. They sense the shift and rush to explain it. But explanation collapses fixation. Silence lets it deepen. Jung believed that transformation begins when the old emotional pattern no longer works. Your withdrawal breaks the pattern he relied on, the one where you carried emotional continuity for both of you. And without that structure, he is forced to confront a terrifying question. What if I misjudged her value? That question doesn't bring peace. It brings obsession, because value is always recognized after the risk of loss appears. And this is the stage where his mind is no longer calm, casual, or indifferent. It is alert, restless, focused, not on control, but on regaining emotional certainty. And the irony is this: the more grounded you become in not caring, the more ungrounded his inner world becomes. This is not revenge. This is not strategy. This is the natural psychological consequence of a woman who stops abandoning herself and lets absence speak louder than emotion ever could. Then comes the moment his behavior begins to contradict his pride. Fixation quietly turns into reach. Not always direct, not always brave, but unmistakable. He may test the waters with something small, a reaction, a delayed message, a casual question that carries no weight on the surface but heavy intention underneath. This is not confidence. This is orientation. He is trying to locate you emotionally without exposing himself. Because your withdrawal didn't just remove affection, it removed certainty. And uncertainty destabilizes identity. In Jungian terms, this is when the ego feels threatened by the unconscious realization of loss. As Carl Jung explained, when the ego can no longer maintain its familiar position, it seeks restoration through external validation. He doesn't want connection yet. He wants confirmation that he still matters to you. This is why his interest feels sudden and intense. It's not desire chasing you. It's fear chasing relief. Before, he could approach you casually because emotional access was guaranteed. Now, every step feels risky, and risk sharpens attention. He listens more carefully, reads between lines, overanalyzes tone, because your emotional neutrality forces him to work internally. And here's the shift most women miss. His effort does not come from clarity. It comes from discomfort. You remove the emotional cushion that allowed him to remain passive. Without it, his nervous system becomes active. He may feel compelled to do something, even if he doesn't yet understand what. This is where sudden interest is born, not because you proved your value, but because you stopped making it easy to ignore. And this interest often arrives tangled, mixed signals, inconsistent effort, moments of closeness followed by hesitation. Why? Because his desire to reconnect is fighting his fear of accountability. To fully approach you now would require acknowledging that your withdrawal meant something. And that acknowledgement costs him his former position. So he hovers, he tests, he watches. But make no mistake, he is no longer emotionally asleep. Your silence has forced him into awareness. Jung believed that growth begins where comfort ends. Your emotional withdrawal pushed him out of comfort without confrontation. And that is why it penetrates deeper than any conversation ever could. You didn't ask for more. You didn't demand effort. You simply stopped giving what was unreciprocated. And now, for the first time, he feels the imbalance. Not intellectually, but viscerally. This is the stage where his mind begins to associate you not with availability, but with value. And value always demands attention. Not because it begs for it, but because it no longer offers itself freely. And from here on, the dynamic cannot return to what it was. Because once a man experiences the loss of emotional access, he never again relates to you from indifference, only from reaction. At some point, something inside him shifts from reaction to self-confrontation. This is the most uncomfortable stage for him, and the most decisive one for you. Because now, your withdrawal is no longer just something he feels. It becomes something he must explain to himself. He starts asking questions he avoided before. Why did she stop caring? What did I assume would always stay? What did I postpone for later that may now be gone? This is where emotional withdrawal does its deepest work. You see, when you cared, his attention stayed external, focused on comfort, routine, convenience. When you stopped, his attention turned inward. And the inward turn is never gentle. In Jung's view, this is the moment when the shadow approaches consciousness. As Carl Jung described, the psyche resists self-awareness until external conditions force it. Your emotional absence becomes that condition. He begins to notice his own patterns. How little effort he gave, how much he assumed, how easily he deferred responsibility because you filled the emotional gaps. And this realization doesn't feel like guilt at first. It feels like unease. Unease that shows up as moodiness, distraction, sudden sensitivity, even defensiveness. Because facing one's emotional negligence threatens the ego's self-image. It's easier to believe you changed than to accept he didn't show up. This is why some men oscillate here. One moment they want closeness. The next, they retreat. Not because you're confusing, but because awareness is destabilizing. Your calm becomes confronting. Your neutrality becomes reflective. Your lack of demand becomes undeniable. And slowly, he realizes something profound. You are no longer available for unconscious dynamics. You're no longer the place where effort is optional. This is when panic either transforms into growth or collapses into avoidance. But here's what matters. Your position is no longer negotiable. Because when a woman stops caring, not to punish but to preserve herself, she stops participating in emotional illusions. She no longer reassures someone into maturity. She no longer explains what should be obvious. And that forces a reckoning. If he moves forward, it must be with presence. If he stays distant, it will be with loss. Either way, the old version of the dynamic is gone. This is the stage where many women feel tempted to re-engage, to soften, to reassure, to relieve the tension. But doing so would undo the very clarity your withdrawal created. Jung believed that individuation requires tension between what was and what must become. Your emotional distance creates that tension, not through coldness, but through self-respect. And whether he rises or retreats, something irreversible has already happened. He has felt what life is like without your emotional availability. And once a man feels that contrast, he never again confuses your presence with something ordinary. Because the mind may rationalize many things, but the nervous system remembers loss. And you, by stopping caring, became unforgettable. After self-confrontation comes the most revealing phase, recalibration. This is when his mind quietly tries to rewrite reality in a way that hurts less. He may tell himself stories. She's just busy. She'll come back to how she was. This phase will pass. Because accepting the truth would mean accepting responsibility. And responsibility changes identity. In Jung's view, the ego resists transformation until resistance becomes more painful than change. As Carl Jung observed, the psyche clings to familiar patterns even when they no longer serve, until the emotional cost becomes unbearable. Your withdrawal increases that cost. Because now, he can't return to emotional comfort without effort. And he can't move forward without risking rejection. So his mind recalibrates. He starts paying attention to details he once ignored. Your tone, your boundaries, your emotional restraint. Not to control you, but to understand where he stands. This is why his behavior may suddenly become more thoughtful, more careful, even oddly respectful. Not because he has fully changed, but because uncertainty has humbled him. You are no longer predictable. And unpredictability forces presence. Before, he interacted with you on autopilot. Now autopilot fails. He has to be there mentally. And that alone creates a psychological shift, because presence requires energy. Here's the paradox. The less you try to affect him, the more he feels affected. Because you're no longer oriented toward his response. You're oriented toward your own inner stability. And that stability becomes confronting. He senses that you are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are choosing yourself, quietly. This is where respect begins to form, even if it's unspoken. Respect not as admiration, but as recognition. This woman is no longer emotionally adjustable. And that recognition alters how he approaches you, or whether he dares to at all. Jung believed that relationships mirror our level of consciousness. When one person grows, the dynamic must either evolve or collapse. Your emotional withdrawal forces that evolution without a single argument. You didn't demand change. You embodied it. And embodiment is impossible to negotiate with. This is the stage where he either steps forward with intention or steps back permanently. But what matters is not his decision. What matters is this. You are no longer emotionally accessible to confusion. And once a woman reaches that place, the power dynamic is no longer about attraction. It's about alignment. Because from here on, only presence can reach you. Eventually, his attention stops circling you and starts circling himself. This is the moment most people don't see because it happens internally. When your emotional withdrawal doesn't break, when you remain calm, consistent, and uninterested in restoring the old dynamic, his mind reaches a psychological dead end. There is no reaction to provoke, no reassurance to extract, no emotional labor to lean on. And that is when meaning collapses. In Jungian psychology, this is the encounter with the inner void, the space that appears when an external emotional anchor disappears. As Carl Jung explained, when projections fail, the psyche is forced to retrieve what it placed outside itself. You were never just a person to him. You were a regulator, a stabilizer, a familiar emotional reference point. And now that reference is gone. This is when his panic either transforms into growth or hardens into avoidance. If he is capable of reflection, this is where accountability begins. He realizes that the comfort he lost was not accidental. It was maintained by your effort. And effort, once recognized, cannot be unseen. If he is not capable, this is where detachment sets in, not from you, but from the discomfort you represent. Because your emotional withdrawal now symbolizes a truth he doesn't want to face. Either way, your position is no longer passive. You have become a psychological threshold. To reach you again would require presence, consistency, and maturity, not charm or convenience. And many men instinctively understand this without being able to articulate it. This is why some never return, and why others return changed. But what matters is not his outcome. What matters is that you are no longer participating in emotional ambiguity. You didn't withdraw to punish. You withdrew to protect your inner balance. And that balance changed the entire dynamic. Jung believed that real power is quiet. It does not argue. It does not convince. It simply is. Your emotional withdrawal carries that quiet power. It doesn't shout, "I'm leaving." It says, "I am no longer here in the way I once was." And that truth lingers in a man's mind long after the connection ends. Because when a woman stops caring, not from bitterness but from clarity, she doesn't disappear. She becomes the moment his unconscious remembers, the moment when access ended and awareness began. At this stage, something irreversible settles into place: emotional hierarchy. Not dominance, not control, but clarity. When you stop caring and do not return to the old rhythm, his mind finally understands something his ego resisted. You are no longer emotionally reachable on his terms. And that realization quietly restructures how he perceives you. Before, your presence was flexible. Now, it feels conditional. This is where his internal dialogue shifts from, "How do I get her attention?" to "What would it take to deserve it?" That question alone changes everything. In Jung's view, the psyche matures only when it is forced to confront limits. As Carl Jung emphasized, boundaries are not punishments, they are initiations. Your emotional withdrawal initiates him into awareness, whether he accepts it or not. Because now, he senses that returning casually is no longer possible. No shortcuts, no emotional recycling, no half-presence. And this is where your silence becomes powerful in a different way. Not as absence, but as standard. You are no longer waiting to be convinced. You are no longer hoping for potential. You are no longer interpreting effort generously. And he feels that shift viscerally. This is when some men experience what feels like a delayed grief. Not for the relationship itself, but for the version of you that no longer exists. The one who tried harder, explained more, stayed longer than she should have. That version is gone. And its absence teaches more than its presence ever could. Because now, he understands that emotional access is not guaranteed, it is earned. And whether he steps forward or steps away, the internal recalibration has already occurred. Your value is no longer theoretical to him. It is measured by loss. This is the quiet truth few talk about. A woman's power is not in how much she gives, but in what happens when she stops. And by not caring anymore, not dramatically but decisively, you didn't end a connection. You ended an illusion. One where effort was optional. One where time was infinite. One where you would always be there to absorb the imbalance. And once that illusion breaks, the mind never returns to sleep. Because awareness, once activated, does not reverse. It only moves forward, with you or without you. Now comes the quiet aftermath, the phase where meaning settles. This is no longer about panic, no longer about fixation, no longer about sudden interest. This is about integration. Your withdrawal has already done its work, and now his psyche must live with the new internal truth. Access to you is no longer assumed. And assumptions, once broken, do not return. He begins to associate you with a specific emotional state, not comfort, not excitement, but consequence. And consequence changes memory. He doesn't just remember you as a woman he talked to, laughed with, or felt close to. He remembers you as the point where something ended inside him, where ease turned into effort, where certainty turned into reflection. In Jung's understanding, this is the imprinting stage. As Carl Jung described, the psyche marks experiences that disrupt unconscious patterns. These experiences become reference points, inner landmarks the mind returns to again and again. You become one of those landmarks, not because you demanded anything, but because you stopped compensating. This is why even if he moves on, something lingers. A comparison, a standard, a memory of a woman who didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't explain. She simply withdrew her energy and let reality speak. And reality was louder than emotion ever was. This is also why he may never fully articulate what happened. Men often lack the language for inner psychological shifts. But the body remembers. The nervous system remembers. The contrast between before and after remains etched. And you feel it too. Because by this stage, you're no longer watching his behavior. You're no longer waiting for resolution. You're no longer emotionally oriented toward him at all. Your withdrawal didn't harden you. It clarified you. You learned that caring without reciprocity drains. That explaining doesn't create understanding. That presence without respect erodes the self. And in stepping back, you reclaim something far more important than his attention, your inner alignment. This is the stage where emotional freedom returns. Not the kind that feels euphoric, the kind that feels grounded. You no longer need him to change for the story to make sense. Because the meaning has already been integrated, you stopped caring not because you didn't feel, but because you finally listened to yourself. And that decision becomes the quiet axis around which everything else turns. Because once a woman experiences the power of emotional withdrawal rooted in self-respect, she never again confuses intensity with connection or effort with love. And neither does the man who felt it, even if he never says it. What remains now is not tension. It is finality. Not an ending filled with drama or words, but a quiet psychological line that cannot be crossed again. When you stop caring and do not return, something fundamental changes in how a man relates to women, even beyond you. Because you become the reference point where emotional complacency stopped working. And that is powerful, not because it hurts him, but because it teaches him. In Jung's view, the psyche evolves through encounters that disrupt comfort and expose truth. As Carl Jung wrote, awareness is born where illusion collapses. Your emotional withdrawal collapsed the illusion that love survives without presence, effort, and reciprocity. You didn't need to explain. You didn't need closure. You didn't need him to understand. Your absence carried the message. And here is the deepest truth of all. When a woman stops caring, she does not become empty. She becomes whole again. She stops leaking energy into uncertainty. She stops negotiating her worth. She stops confusing patience with love. And in doing so, she steps out of the psychological role that kept her small. What happens in his mind after that is no longer your responsibility. He may grow. He may repeat patterns. He may regret. He may rationalize. But none of that changes what you gained. You gained clarity. You gained emotional sovereignty. You gained the ability to walk away without collapsing. And that is the moment real power returns. Not power over him, but power over your own inner life. Because love that requires you to abandon yourself is not love. And caring that costs you peace is not devotion. It is self-erasure. You didn't stop caring to make him feel something. You stopped caring because you finally felt yourself. And that is why his mind changed. Because when a woman chooses herself, the world around her must recalibrate. Quietly, reluctantly, irreversibly.